One mistake with alien paperwork. Now 3 beautiful sisters call him husband. Lieutenant Jake Morgan thought he understood the assignment when he landed on Valara Prime for diplomatic training, and he was very wrong about everything that would happen next. The Valaran people were a proud warrior race with purple skin that shimmered like starlight, and eyes that held the depth of galaxies. And their females stood taller than most human men with strength that could bend steel bars like paper clips, but what really made them dangerous was their beauty, which could make any man forget his own name. Jake was supposed to spend 6 months learning their customs and their language and their way of life, so Earth could build better relationships with this powerful alien civilization. And he was good at his job, or at least he thought he was, until the day he met the 3 sisters who would change his life forever. Her name was Lyra, and she was the eldest daughter of a noble family. And she walked into the cultural exchange office where Jake was studying with such grace that he dropped his digital tablet on his foot, and she smiled at his clumsiness, showing teeth that were just a bit too sharp to be human. But somehow that made her even more attractive. Lyra had been assigned as his cultural guide, which meant she would teach him everything about Valaran society, and she took her job very seriously, and for 3 weeks they spent every day together walking through the crystal cities and eating strange foods that tasted like cinnamon mixed with lightning, and learning the intricate hand gestures that meant the difference between a greeting and a declaration of war. Then came the day that Jake had to fill out the residency forms because all humans staying longer than a month needed official documentation, and the paperwork was written in Valaran script, which looked like someone had let a cat dance across a keyboard while holding a paintbrush, and Jake thought he was doing fine with Lyra helping him translate each line. The form asked about his living situation and his purpose on the planet, and his family status, and whether he had any dependents, and Jake checked all the boxes carefully while Lyra explained what each section meant, and he signed his name at the bottom with confidence, thinking he had finally mastered something in this alien world. What Jake did not know was that he had accidentally checked a box in the family section that translated roughly to seeking traditional bonding, and another box that said he accepted all cultural conditions without exception. And in Valaran society, these 2 boxes together meant only one thing. 3 days later, Jake woke up to find flowers outside his apartment door, and not just any flowers, but Valaran bonding blooms which only grew in the sacred gardens and were worth more than his yearly salary, and there were hundreds of them forming a path from his door all the way down the hallway. Lyra appeared moments later, wearing ceremonial robes that sparkled like the night sky, and her expression was a mixture of happiness and something else that Jake could not quite read, and she told him that her family was honored by his proposal, and that her 2 younger sisters, Maya and Claire, were equally pleased to meet their new husband. Jake's brain stopped working for approximately 30 seconds while he tried to process what she had just said, and when his thoughts finally restarted, all he could say was what proposal, and Lyra looked confused and pulled out a copy of his residency forms and pointed to the boxes he had checked. The words swam before his eyes as Lyra explained that he had formally requested to bond with a noble family and had agreed to follow all Valaran traditions, and in their culture, when a worthy male proposed to the eldest daughter, it was assumed he would also bond with her unmarried sisters to strengthen the family alliance, and there was no way to undo it without bringing great shame to everyone involved. Jake tried to explain that it was a mistake, and that he had not meant to propose to anyone, and that he barely understood half of what he was signing. But Lyra's face fell, and her eyes dimmed, and she asked quietly if he found her unworthy, and Jake immediately said no, because that was the truth, and she was amazing and beautiful and kind. Then Maya and Claire arrived, and Jake understood why the universe was playing this joke on him, because all 3 sisters were stunning in completely different ways, and Maya had a wild energy about her, with silver markings on her arms that moved like living tattoos, and she grinned at Jake like she had just won a prize, and Claire was quieter with softer features and eyes that seemed to see straight through his soul to all his secrets and fears. The 3 sisters explained that they had been watching Jake for weeks, because Lyra had told them about the smart and funny human who tried so hard to understand their ways and who never made fun of their customs even when he did not understand them. And they had all agreed that he would make a good partner, even before he submitted the bonding forms. Jake sat down because his legs felt weak, and he asked what would happen if he tried to refuse now. and Lyra's face became very serious, and she explained that rejecting a bonding after formal acceptance would mark her family as unworthy and would destroy her father's position in society, and her sisters would never be able to bond with anyone else because everyone would assume they were flawed. The weight of that responsibility hit Jake like a physical force, and he looked at the three women who were watching him with hope and fear in their eyes, and he realized that his simple paperwork mistake had become something much bigger than himself. Maya stepped forward and put her hand on his shoulder, and her touch was surprisingly gentle for someone who could probably break him in half, and she told him that they did not expect him to love them right away, and that bonding in Velaran culture was about partnership and respect and growing together over time. Claire added in her soft voice that they would teach him everything he needed to know, and that they understood he came from a different world with different customs, and that they would be patient while he adjusted to this new reality. Lyra took both his hands in hers and looked into his eyes and asked him one simple question, which was whether he could see himself trying to make this work, and whether he could give them a chance to show him what their culture really meant. Jake thought about everything he had learned in his weeks on Valara Prime, and he thought about how kind Lyra had been and how her sisters seemed equally genuine. And he thought about the fact that Earth needed this alliance, and that refusing might damage diplomatic relations. And he also thought about how lonely he had been before coming here and how nice it felt to have people who actually wanted to be with him. So he took a deep breath and said yes, he would try. And the smiles that lit up all three faces were bright enough to rival their planet's twin suns. The bonding ceremony happened 2 days later, in a garden filled with those expensive flowers, and Jake wore traditional Velaran clothes that felt like wearing liquid starlight, and the whole thing was conducted in a language he barely understood, but he repeated the words carefully and meant them when he promised to honor and protect his new family. His commanding officer on Earth was extremely confused when Jake sent the report explaining his new marital status, but the diplomats were thrilled, because apparently bonding with a noble Velaran family gave Earth a much stronger political position than any treaty could have managed. Living with 3 wives turned out to be nothing like Jake had imagined, and Lyra took charge of managing their household with military precision, and she made schedules for everything, including time spent with each sister. And she insisted that Jake learn proper Velaran cooking, because that was how families bonded in their culture. Maya was chaos incarnate, and she dragged Jake into all sorts of adventures, including climbing the Crystal Mountains and racing hoverbikes through the city, and nearly getting arrested for breaking curfew. And she laughed at everything and made him feel brave even when he was terrified. Claire was his quiet sanctuary, and she taught him Velaran poetry and art, and she would sit with him in comfortable silence when the cultural differences became overwhelming. And she had a way of knowing what he needed before he knew it himself. The 3 sisters never competed for his attention, and instead they worked together like a well-trained team. And when one was busy, the others stepped in, and they genuinely seemed to love each other as much as they were learning to care for him. Jake still made mistakes constantly, and he used the wrong honorific when meeting Lyra's father, and accidentally insulted Maya's cooking by suggesting it needed salt, which apparently meant something very rude in Velaran, and he once wore the wrong color to a ceremony and caused a minor scandal, but his wives always defended him and helped him learn from each error. 6 months turned into a year, and Jake realized he was not pretending anymore, and he actually looked forward to coming home to his strange, beautiful family, and Lyra's laugh was his favorite sound, and Maya's energy kept life exciting, and Claire's wisdom kept him grounded. The other humans on Valara Prime thought he was insane, and they asked how he managed, living with 3 alien wives, and Jake just smiled and said it was complicated but worth it, and he did not know how to explain that he had found something he never knew he was looking for. Earth eventually offered to transfer him back home, but Jake declined, and he had responsibilities here, and partners who depended on him, and a life that made sense in ways his old life never had. And besides, Lyra was teaching him advanced combat techniques, and Maya promised to take him to the